Not done a spiritual book club book in a long time, but I really was drawn to share this book. And it's something that I read several years ago. It's called I Don't Want to Be an Empath Anymore by Aura. Now, this is a great book to read if you are someone who is highly sensitive. You can kind of feel everyone's emotions around you, and you are looking to not only establish better boundaries, but also know which energy belongs to you, which one belongs to others, and if you are really looking for a new way to kind of work through some wounds and really bring out your inner child. Now, there's a few key points in this book that I want to discuss, and the first section is on core wounds. Now, in the book, she states that our core wounds are what kind of sets the stage and tonality for every other wound that we come across in our life. These core wounds either affirm or deny any other action that we may experience during our, time from childhood to adulthood. These wounds are considered the foundational structures of our pain. Now, core wounds do not always lead to mother wounds, father wounds. They weren't always created by a parent. In fact, some people are fortunate enough to have parents who know how to parent a sensitive child, so their core wounds weren't directly affected by their parent. Their core wounds came about in other ways, maybe bullying in school, or some type of other action where they had to deal with someone outside of their family that created these core wounds. But core wounds itself, for a lot of us, do trace back to either our mother or father wounds. And she suggests that by mothering yourself, mothering those parts of you where those wounds were created, is what leads to you being able to heal and deal with those core wounds in a way that helps bring about your inner child. Now, one of my favorite examples that she used is that of a woman who was in the military. She grew up a tomboy, and when she got older, she got into the military. This woman's desire was really to bring about that feminine energy in her. She didn't want to completely erase, her career and things like that. She wasn't trying to become overly feminine. She just wanted to know how to show her feminine side. So a part of her inner child desire to be able to do her hair, wear makeup, get dressed up, just those little small things. And by doing so, she was really able to help heal her inner child by feeling like that beautiful woman that she's always wanted to feel without taking away from her achievements or anything else that she's done in her life. Another talked about how a young man always had to be the smartest person in the room. He had to show that he was over intelligent, but doing so took away his love of learning, his love of knowledge, and now he himself kind of felt like he was just being a little bit obnoxious. And so he had to take a step back and do find a way to enjoy learning, enjoy loving knowledge, and sharing that knowledge without feeling like you're coming across as needing to be the smartest person in the room. And then a final example was how pets, for this man and then someone else, really allowed that person to bring out that childlike joy in them. They had so much responsibility in their life that by getting a pet was able to bring out those parts of you that you didn't know existed. Pets can also be very healing for your inner child if you've ever had one. Even if you don't, if you've always wanted one, maybe this is your sign that you need to try to get a pet in order to help heal your inner child. But she talked about how pets can be very freeing, and it kind of releases you, not necessarily from the day-to-day responsibilities, because obviously you still have to take care of your pet, but it allows a side of you to come out that you may have not known even existed. And finally, in the core wound section, she discusses that working with your inner child is like negotiating a spiritual contract. For anyone who has kind of has never gotten in touch with their inner child, or has kind of forgotten what it's like to feel that childlike wonder and joy, when you work on healing your inner child, you are making a promise to yourself to not hold on to that hurt, not hold on to that pain, but really come to understanding the fact that things happen, but I'm not going to let it destroy that joy that I have within me. And so, when dealing and healing with your inner child, you are creating the spiritual contract with yourself to not only mother them, but to also give them what they needed in that time and period by doing it for yourself now. By finding the things now that would have pleased your, doing the things now, excuse me, that would have pleased your inner child and things that maybe bring you joy. Let's say you've never been to an amusement park before. You weren't able to go, maybe your family couldn't afford it or things like that. And something you've always wanted to do was just go ride a roller coaster. What's wrong with that? Take a day trip, go somewhere and just ride a roller coaster. Feel that childlike joy again. Get all the cotton candy, the elephant ears, whatever it is that you want. A lot of times we see, especially on those nostalgia pages, where it's commercials from toys from the 80s and 90s, and you see so many people in the comments say, well, I have the money now and now nobody can stop me. You need to bring that stuff back. That's what you do. You make that promise to yourself, okay, I couldn't have it as a child, but now I have my own and I am free to do whatever I want to with my money. And this is what brings me joy. This is what I'm going to do in order to really heal my inner child and kind of bring that, fulfill that need that that child wanted at the time, a time that I couldn't do then. I'm definitely going to do it now. All right, so the next section that I want to discuss is the chapter on managing your energetic emotions. And in this section, she hits on something that a lot of people talk about, how we have now within the spiritual movement gone with this glorification of positive vibes and only being able to feel positive emotions, and anything outside of that is a no-no. Here she discusses that in order to really be your whole self, to be your true self, you need to find a way to not only go with the good, excuse me, but also acknowledge and integrate the bad so that you can become your whole self. Somehow we've been made to believe that you aren't a good spiritual person if you are someone who acknowledges negative emotions or the bad within you. When we know, especially, that that's the exact opposite. The only way you can heal is by getting through those tough things. And we know that there are some healers out there that will not allow you to talk about the bad because they believe that it somehow acknowledging the bad gives them power. But when you don't explain those methods completely, or if you're only doing it from a message of positive vibes only, you can come across someone who's holding in all of those negative emotions to the point where it can become completely unhealthy for them to do so. And you know that emotions and things like that can really take a toll on the body over a period of time. That's because the shame that you may be made to feel because of these negative emotions will only allow half of you to show up. And when only half of you is showing up at any given moment, you are going to feel completely unfulfilled in everything that you do. And as a caveat, it doesn't matter what type of spell work you do, Reiki clearing, energy cleansing, spiritual baths you do, if you aren't acknowledging those negative feelings, those negative emotions, and really processing to work through them, none of that good energy, none of that stuff that you're really trying to work through and deal with is ever going to stick, because you're only doing half the effort. You're only willing to show half of yourself. Again, this book is great because it calls out a lot of the fallacies that we have within the spiritual community. Now, it goes on to say that a lot of people seek spirituality in order to either hide from their pain or confront their pain. But a lot of time with these positive vibe only thinkers, they are using their spirituality to really hide from the true pain that they have experienced. This causes their spirituality to essentially become shallow because you're only allowing positive thinking to emerge. You are never fully allowing yourself to heal from those negative experiences, that pain that you initially sought or ran to spirituality for. So when you don't acknowledge those negative pieces, those negative experiences, your core wounds are never being fully healed. Therefore, you're never really truly allowing yourself the opportunity to experience spirituality in its wholeness. She says that in order to really get in touch with that side of you, you have to integrate that human ugliness, those negative experience, into your divine wholeness. And this is what brings about that balance that so many people who go into spirituality are seeking. And caveat to that, we know that if you aren't allowing those negative parts of you to come out to be healed and acknowledged, you're not really experiencing any true emotional growth because of that, because you're only looking at one side of the issue. And as I said, it's all about balance. So you need to understand and acknowledge the ugliness of it in order to capture the true beauty of the spiritual journey that you're seeking to have. And since I took a lot of notes while reading this book, I do want to make sure I get this next section completely correct. So I'm going to read from the notes that I took, especially about part about dividing your emotions into three categories. Now, she says that there are three categories that you can put your emotions into: sacred, neutral, and harmful. Sacred emotions include every experience, and it allows us to know that every experience and every feeling can be a transformative one. You can learn truth, beauty, and love out of your pain. Sacred emotions, a sacred category is a reclamation of something, whether it's your power, independence, or creativity. It's easy to take a good emotion and use it as a sacred expression, but it's the bad ones that are the hardest, because using a bad emotion and turning it into a sacred emotion requires intention. This is where you need to really be in tune with energy signatures and what you're feeling. It's easy to consciously choose how to react and express your perceived emotions. Experiences can lead to you expressing yourself creatively. So, for instance, say you experience something negative in your life. To turn that into a sacred emotion, you can use it to write an article. You can use it to write a book about your experience. Say you're feeling jealousy. You see something online, and you see somebody took a trip somewhere. So in order to fulfill that part of you that made you feel that jealousy, you in turn need to take a trip as well. This is not doing that one-upsmanship or saying that, oh, well, if you can do it, I can do it too. You need to be doing it from a sincere place in order to fulfill that part of you that's bringing up that negative emotion. She says that every bad emotion has a job that can create a good emotion, and opening up that line of communication is how you create that sacred expression. Now, with the harmful emotions, harmful category, harmful is when you are cruel to yourself and others as a result of your feelings. Usually, this occurs when you aren't aware of your emotions. You've been raised to believe that there are only good feelings and bad feelings, and your brain becomes wired to avoid the bad, which we know never actually helps you avoid the bad. Instead, the longer you avoid them, the more speed you give to this harmful manifestation of these emotions. You can't turn towards a sacred manifestation because you've somehow managed to wander into the harmful manifestation territory, even though you're telling yourself that you're actively avoiding it. Without facing those negative emotions, without facing the bad, you've actually put yourself exactly where you don't want to be, which is a harmful manifestation. You see how that works? But she says that even good emotions can have harmful manifestations. For example, you're in a new relationship, everything is wonderful, but somehow this new relationship has now affected how you communicate with your friends and family. Oftentimes, we hear of people saying their friends have changed up on them once they've entered into a new relationship. That's because you've put on rose colored glasses, and your fear is now that your friends and family are going to somehow harm your relationship or put you in a space of where you aren't able to be 100% attentive to your relationship. But while doing that, you're also now ignoring your friends and family. Because of that, you don't want anyone to affect your happiness. So you need to know how to balance it out, how to pull yourself out of that negative emotion. This comes where boundary setting is in place, not only with your emotion, or sorry, not only with your relationship, but also your friends and family. You need to know how to be able to split your time appropriately and still be there for everyone without overgiving yourself in one area while ignoring the other. Finally, the neutral. Neutral is where you want to be after you've worked through the harmful and the sacred. Neutral is also the hardest to work with because once you've delved into sacred manifestations for a while, neutrality does become easier. This happens when you experience an emotion and you truly realize that it doesn't need an expression after all. Feelings that you see that they're there, but you validate and realize that the validation is all they need from you. She used the example of a toddler crying, throwing a temper tantrum. The parent sees this, they acknowledge their feelings, they validate it, but you aren't going to do more than that. You aren't going to give in to the temper tantrum. And this is what we are all striving to achieve. You make a habit of allowing your sacred manifestations to be expressed so much to the point that you realize over time that you don't always need to act on them in order for them to be effective. Any of your emotions at the end of the day can go into these categories. And when you do this, you can figure out what those emotions and what those feelings need and how you can express them in a way that truly works for you. This takes a lot of practice, but it can be done with the right effort. Favorite part of this, something that we have heard people talk about and say an infinite amount of times. Just because someone has it worse than you does not mean that your feelings and your experiences are any less valid. How many times have you heard people say, oh, well, at least you should be happy for this? You should be grateful for that. She says that, yes, there are people who are suffering, but that shouldn't make me grateful for the issues that I'm having because I don't want to have these issues. And that is one of my biggest pet peeves. I know that can be a pet peeve for a lot of people as well. You still rather not have those issues. Gratitude is great, but you should not feel grateful for your problems. And forcing yourself to feel grateful for things that you want to change isn't going to make that change happen any quicker. It actually isn't going to create the change that you're desiring. This is where it can actually lead into self pity if you aren't careful. And she says the way to deal with self pity, well, self pity first wants you to slow down and recognize all the chaos going on around you. It's that inner call that something definitely does need to be changed, and it wants you to process everything going on around you, because if you don't, it's only going to get worse. It'll seep out into other areas of your life. So what you need to do is to feel this emotion without trying to solve it, correct it, or insert any positive emotions into it. Allow yourself to possibly feel terrible without trying to change it. Validate your emotions and you'll find that it goes away on its own, and it also reveals deeper emotions that you have yet to work with.